Hi, greetings. It's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, and this is video number 5 in the marketing series. And today I want to talk about analyzing the marketing environment. So stay tuned as we talk about some key elements that if you own a business or you're working for a company that you really should considering. So some things to consider is about who your customers are, how the company competes effectively, things that they consider, and corporate partners. You know, how all these can affect your marketing strategy. You really have to take a look at the macro environment of your organization and be able to recognize the different segments that your company is targeting. So let's talk about these things as well as social trends that your organization might consider if you're thinking about marketing. So no business can be in business unless it has, customers, and faithful customers at that. And sometimes older companies need to change their image as things change. Take Travelodge, for instance. They're a company that was really big at a time, and they had kind of a slump, and then they had to change their image to become more desirable. And so in doing so, they had to take a look at their framework and really understand who they are, how they're perceived, and where they wanted to go. And this is common for so many different types of organizations. And if you own a company, you should really do the same thing too. So here's some things to consider and analyze. So you have a macro environment, which includes culture, demographics, social, technology, economics, political and legal things. You need to consider also your immediate environment, your competition, and also your corporate partners. Each of these things has an effect on your organization. In the immediate environment, we're considering the consumers, your competition and your corporate partners. It really is. There's only so much piece of the pie to go around, and your company needs to make sure that it gets its fair share. Being aware of core competencies and existing knowledge, facilities, patents. These are the things that you have that you can leverage and apply towards new markets or even new products. And in order to stay competitive, you need to make sure that your products are competitive with your competition. In order to do so, it's kind of a no-brainer, but you need to know the strengths and weaknesses of your competition. Therefore, you have to really identify who your competition is, and you have to have a proactive rather than a reactive strategy. An example of a proactive and a reactive strategy is Gillette versus Schick. The two big names in shaving razors. Gillette accused Schick of engaging in false, misleading advertising when ads claimed that its hydro razor would hydrate skin. Maybe some of you guys remember this very famous case. And then Schick came back and countered with the complaint that Gillette's Fusion Pro Glide razor ads attempted to deceive when they asserted that the blades were the thinnest blades ever. So there's an example of being proactive versus reactive and being very, very clear on who your competition is. So we always have corporate partners. If you're a manufacturer and if you want to really support your corporate partner, you got to make sure that your retailers are getting exactly what they need when they need it. And we call that just-aligned delivery systems. And you need to really make sure that your corporate partners are always completely satisfied. And so that means you've got to be aware of how your product affects their image. It's always got to be seen as top quality within its class and representative of the image that the organization wants to produce. And so in order to do so, you can take a look at the macro environmental factors, like the demographics, the social, the technological, the economic, the political, legal factors, and the culture of those that are consuming your product or service. And you must be respectful of the people who are loyal to your brands, or you may lose that market share. So when they say culture, you really have to think about country culture as a whole, like the United States, and then regional cultures, because different consumers have different trends. I mean, if you think about products that people consume, let's say clam chowder, for instance. In the Northeast United States, they consume a lot of clam chowder. It's kind of a regional cultural thing. And a chowder cracker company decided to eliminate a brand. Well, when they did that, one region, who was the biggest consumer of that product, put a boycott on that in New England, because they demanded that they wanted that product or service. So once you ruin your reputation by not understanding who your consumers are, it's kind of hard to build that back up. So you really have to do your research and understand how important brand loyalty is. And you could do that by looking at demographics, really understanding the snapshot of your typical consumer in a specific target market. And one way of doing that is taking a look at generational cohorts. Right now we have essentially 4 generations that are still alive, maybe 5 if you count the traditionals. Right now, Generation Z, these are the people who were born from 2001 to 2014. Essentially, they're about 15 years old right now, 0 to 15. Generation Y is the biggest generation now that baby boomers have been either dying off or retiring. And Generation Y are the people who were born approximately in 1977 to 2000. And depending on where you look, these dates will change. Gen X, 1965 to 1976. And then the baby boomers, 1946 to 1964. And again, the parents of the baby boomers are the traditionals. There's still a few of them around. But probably the least influential out of all the generations, since they are the smallest generation. I know that I have a child who is a Generation Z, and he greatly influences what I buy. I think about it, and when he wants something, because I love him, I can't give him what he needs. But marketers know that if they understand who the generation is, that people have purchasing power, and that they will make decisions based on the needs of each of their segmented targets. So purchasing power is really all about income. Many middle class families feel that there's been a decline in their purchasing power over years, and that actually provides an interesting niche, a segment for people to market into. Being able to create a product that people in the middle class see as tremendous value is really important. Educational level is another segment that can be considered, and it is often related to income, and that determines spending power. Gender is something also to consider. Male or female roles over the years really have been shifting. It's interesting that today, on average, women now make up 60% of the college population. When I started teaching nearly 20 years ago, it was primarily men that were in the classroom. So it's been interesting watching that shift take place over the last couple of decades. So marketing always needs to change as change. So ethnicity is something else to consider. Here in the United States, some reports show that by the year 2050, minorities, people of color, will represent about 50% of the population. And so that different studies show different types of trends, but you have to be aware of these things when you are building your marketing strategy. And so being smart, a smart marketer really matters and can be the difference between whether or not your business stays in business or your company stays competitive or not. Social trends, things like health and wellness concerns, green consumption, and privacy concerns are some of the things that are trending right now. Health and wellness really can be a worldwide pandemic. Epidemics that are occurring also can be a concern that can be capitalized on in marketing. Teenage obesity is one of those topics. And then, in general, just healthy living are things that are trends that marketers can be aware of. Greener consumers very often will choose a company that markets, showing how they're being better to the earth in what they do. And there's a whole group of people who prefer to buy products from organizations that are environmentally friendly, and have environmentally friendly packaging and merchandise. These days, privacy concerns is another thing that can be capitalized as marketers. People are concerned about a loss of privacy, identity theft, do not call lists, and do not email lists. And so that's another thing that marketers have to consider. There have been technological advantages that impact every aspect of marketing. And so there are always new products, new forms of communication, and new retail channels that are emerging at all times. I can remember when Amazon first came into business in their and it seemed like nobody would want to buy books online because they could just go to a bookstore and buy things. Now they're the biggest retailer on the face of the earth, and you can get just about anything on Amazon. And you can sell anything as a retailer on Amazon. So there's another market channel for you. Economic situation always matters, and when the economy is good, people spend more, but when the economy is bad, people tend to hold back. And so being very conscious as a marketer about who your clientele is and what your segments look like, you can create a marketing strategy to affect that. I can remember when in 2008, when the economy was really bad, stores like Nordstrom's and Costco and Walmart, these companies' sales continued to prosper because they really had strong marketing plans and a good business model. So the other thing to consider, and I'm not going to ramble on, I'll just mention it briefly, and you can look these things up, are the political and regulatory environment. If you are doing business, you really must be aware of the different regulatory acts that are out there, especially affecting fair trade. And so the Federal Trade Commission, the Robinson-Putnam Act, the Clayton Act, and the Sherman Antitrust Act are all things that marketers must consider. All right, so I have given you a lot of things to think about in analyzing the market environment. I hope that you found something to take away from this market and consider as you're building your marketing strategy or your marketing plans. And I hope that you have a great day. I'm Dr.